Thank you for calling the Ruckus. Who am I speaking with?
Oh, hi. It's Kathy Duva.
Hi, Kathy Duva. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. I'm doing fine. Thank you. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Joining us on the line, also Ryan Bivens, that I'm sure you know, Mr. Sweet Boxing, Ismail Abdul-Salam of Beats Boxing Mayhem, and Brandon Stubbs of Punch to the Face. So we're all going to ask you a few questions, nothing too wild, because I know the listeners are looking forward to hearing from you. Main Events has a lot of things coming up that, you know, the listeners want to hear about. So it's our honor to have you join us. So if you're just tuning in, we're joined now by Kathy Duva, CEO of Main Events, and we're going to ask her a few questions. And if you have questions for her, tweet them to us, and we will ask. So let me start off, Kathy. I just wanted to ask you, as we know, the big fight on the horizon right now is the Bernard Hopkins versus Sergey Kovalev fight that's happening in November. You know, in this day of how political boxing has become, how difficult was it to close this fight out? It seemed like both of the fighters were anxious to tangle with each other, but how difficult was it to make this fight?
It was probably the easiest deal we ever made. Because what happened was, Hopkins was pursuing the Stevenson fight, and there came a point when he must have come to the conclusion that it wasn't going to get done within the timeline that had been set for him by the IBF, which would have put his title at risk. And so I got a call from Eric Gomez at about noon on Thursday, and we had contracts in the hands of the people at the IBF by 5 o'clock on Thursday. Actually, they got the contracts around 3:34. So we negotiated the whole deal, wrote the contract, got everything done, got everything signed in the space of about 27 hours.
Now, with the actual final contract that was signed, was the final contract complete prior to the Caparello fight? Because we saw Kovalev signing the contract prior to his fight. The whole thing was a done deal, just contingent upon Kovalev winning his fight.
Yes, well, coming out of this fight with his title, he could have gotten a draw and still gotten the fight off, but fortunately we didn't get to that. If we normally would never want to sign a contract the day before a fight. I mean, we're all superstitious enough here that would just be, that's a crazy thing to do, and I know it, but the IBF had a deadline. It was 5 o'clock on Friday. And basically this deal was presented to us, and it was, okay, here's the deal. If you can agree to these terms, we can get this done, and we need to get it done quickly. And, when you've got two fighters who really want to fight each other and are willing to put their egos aside, and when the two promoters are willing to put their egos aside and just be fair with each other, it's pretty easy to get this done. What mystifies me is why so few big fights get done, to tell you the truth, because it's a lot more to work on a fight, a lot more fun to be involved in a fight like this. And frankly, I think it's better for the fighters' careers. There's not going to be a loser in this fight.
Absolutely.
We got a legend fighting a guy who may become one, and that's what makes the event compelling. That's what makes our sport great. Sometimes.
Exactly. Definitely two of the best fighting the best. And the fight appearing over HBO, where you guys have, a good relationship working on HBO. Was that ever an issue in the negotiations of where the fight would appear?
Not for a minute. Not for a minute.
Ismail?
Hey, Kathy. I also wanted to ask you, I remember initially when, it got confirmed that Stevenson was going to be leaving and the fight wasn't going to be happening, you seemed pretty derisive about the fact that he was going to fight Hopkins. You mentioned his age and everything. What changed when you knew that the fight was going to be possible for Kovalev that made that fight very attractive for you?
Well, look, my feeling was that Hopkins was maybe an easier opponent than Kovalev. I still think that. I think Kovalev's going to beat him. But, Stevenson was a very different situation. His promoter had made an agreement, and, we believed that agreement was far enough along that it was binding. He was, running and going to make a fight that I still think the fans, would have loved to have seen Stevenson fight Kovalev. But that wasn't going to happen because Stevenson decided he didn't want to go in that direction. And then the people who advised him to pull out of the Kovalev fight basically didn't do their jobs. So we took advantage of that situation and we did ours. So we've got we've got a terrific fight. We've got a compelling story. There's no need to compare them. We wanted, Hopkins is an opponent that he's unique. The fact that we're talking about fighting someone who's literally old enough to be Sergey's father is pretty amazing. But he's an amazing man. So we'll accept he's an alien and that he can do this stuff, and everybody wants to see it, and I want to see it. The whole world wants to see it. So this is great, and there's this little sense there of turnabout being fair play. Let's put it that way.
Right. Now, the piggyback on that, I know you mentioned, people always say business should never be personal, but I know it seemed like you took it very personal when you had to deal with that whole situation with Stevenson. Whatever the outcome happens between Hopkins and Kovalev, would you ever even consider revisiting a fight with Stevenson based on what happened before?
I will never. I've learned a long time ago to never rule anything out. I would never say never to anything. So, they have to figure out what it is they want to do with his career. They made their choice, and I don't know what's going to happen. There's, when the fight's over, I don't want to start looking past this fight. This fight was one of the goals. Sergey wanted to unify the titles. That was his goal. That's what he asked me to do. Get me all the titles as quickly as you can. So when this opportunity presented itself, my job was to get it done, and I did. Now it's Sergey's job to go out there and win the titles. Once all that has happened, then we'll figure out what we're going to do next.
Right.
Ryan?
Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Ryan.
I got to wonder. Kovalev, he knocks out, pretty much everyone he fights. But Bernard Hopkins has never been stopped. So, Are you concerned? How the fight might go if it goes 12 rounds, because Sergey never really goes long.
That's what makes the fight interesting, because these are some of the questions that haven't been answered. Can Sergey stop Hopkins? Can Sergey go the distance with him if he can't stop him? Can Hopkins keep up with Sergey? Can he impose his pace and his will on Sergey? Can Sergey impose his pace and will on Hopkins? That's what makes this fight fascinating. And I have to say, I guess because I've been doing this a long time, and I was fortunate that the first big event I ever worked on was a fight between Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns. And I got to work on some other major fights in my lifetime. The prior Arguello 2 fight, the 3 Holyfield Bowe fights, Holyfield Foreman. I mean, so many Holyfield's great fights, right up until he fought Mike Tyson. The terrific fight between all of the terrific fights that Lennox Lewis was involved in, including his fight with Tyson, his fights with Holyfield. When you get involved with events like that, I think you get a different perspective, and recognize that I don't understand. I really am baffled by it. I don't understand the downside lately in recent years, this attitude of, well, I don't want to fight somebody who might damage my brand by beating me. It's just insanity. What if those fighters I just mentioned had just decided they didn't want to fight each other because, well, somebody might win and somebody might lose? This is a sport. That's the idea. You're supposed to go out and see who's best. It's not like a baseball team can say, well, I don't want to play that team because they might beat me, so I'm going to go here and play this other team. In any other sport, people would laugh at this. In our sport, it's considered remarkable that two guys want to go out and see who's going to win, not knowing who's going to win the fight. And both knowing that, somebody's not going to be the winner, and when the fight's over, they're both going to go on with their lives, go on with their careers perhaps, and they'll have a legacy. They'll be remembered. People will your career is fleeting, however many years it lasts. And when it's over, I know so many fighters who, their careers are over, and for the rest of their life, they live with that legacy, whatever it is. And obviously Bernard Hopkins understands that legacy is more important than the risk he's taking, and so does Sergey Kovalev. And that's something they've got going for them that an awful lot of fighters don't recently, and it's a shame.
It's a shame. It's the most intriguing fight of the year so far for me. Do you know or have any ideas on what might be on the undercard?
No, not yet. We're just getting the press conference together. We'll
like,
get
how about
week.
maybe not opponents, but fighters that might be there? You know, stable fighters.
Nah, it's too soon to tell.
Too
this
soon. Okay.
Stuff, yeah, well, that stuff comes together a little bit later.
How about what card? There's a card in October 18th at the 2300 Arena in Philadelphia. Yeah, Steve Cunningham's on that card. Do you have any ideas there?
And I know, the matchmakers just started reaching out to people about that yesterday. So we'll have some answers soon. Jolene's on vacation this week, so it's slowing us down. She's working hard while on vacation, unfortunately, but for her. But she and Russell will get it all together, I'm sure, very soon.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about the other big fight that you have coming up that's going to be taking place in my backyard. We hardly get those over here. Curtis Stevens is going to be fighting Hassan and Dom for an IBF middleweight eliminator bout. Why Santa Monica for this fight?
Well, Hassan and Dam's promoter is Michael King, and he's from Santa Monica. And he puts his fights on there, and he won the purse bid, so he gets to put the fight where he wants, and that's where he put it. But it's a great chance to go out to Santa Monica. It's a beautiful place. I love it there.
Yeah, it's great for us who on the West Coast who don't get a lot of these great fights. As Curtis Stevens is making his return in the ring, how much inspiration is he drawing from the other fighters in your stable, and as you guys head into the fall with some of these bigger fights?
Well, I think everybody's excited because they kind of feel the buzz, which is great. But I think in Curtis's case at this point, he's focused on his own fight, which is also a very interesting fight in its own right. Also a tremendous event, and that's another one of those fights where you just want to see it. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. I believe Curtis will win. Obviously, he's our guy, and we're with him. And we maneuvered him into this position so that he could get the chance to hopefully get a shot at the title if he's successful. So he's going out to win, and I'm sure Hassan is going to do the same thing, and it's going to be a terrific show. Can't wait.
The IBF title?
Yes.
It's an eliminator.
Mm-hmm. It's an eliminator. Right. So the winner will fight the winner of Jermaine Taylor and Solomon.
Yeah. What do you think about that fight?
Funny joke there, Ryan. I just saw that on Twitter. That's a pretty good one. I was looking at it while I was waiting to get on. I'm not going to repeat it, though. It's up to you. I'm sorry. What was your question?
Yeah. I said, what do you think about the Taylor Solomon fight?
I don't know what to think. So we'll just watch it. They're a week apart, right? Just about, and I think they're both on ESPN, correct?
Yeah.
Right. I love that ESPN.
Do you have any concerns about Taylor's health?
I at this point would just like to reserve judgment. Okay. I don't know, so I don't think I'm qualified to have an opinion at this point. But we're just going to. Curtis is going to go into his fight, and he's going to win it, and then we'll worry about what happens next.
All right. Do you have any more questions for her, Ismail?
I have one. I wanted to ask you about the period on NBC Sports from about the end of 2012 to about mid-2013. There were a lot of good fights that you were putting on, but there were a few controversial decisions that happened, particularly with Adamek and Cunningham. And Glasscoff and Mike Scott. Did you have any worries about that? The fact that the fights were so good, but you were getting these, a lot of fan chatter about the actual decisions. Did that worry you any, or were you happy with just the way fans were just talking about the fights, period?
You know what? It's interesting. In the days of Twitter, fans have so much more to say about this than they used to, and I think on the whole that's a great thing. I remember running around the press section the night that Pernell Whitaker fought Oscar De La Hoya and having the scorecards in my hands and saying, and hearing reporters say to me, well, he lost it in the last round, and I'm walking, Pernell didn't fight hard enough in the last round, Oscar stole it, and I'm running around the press section and showing the scorecard that had, I think Oscar was up by 8 rounds, and saying he couldn't have won the fight. No matter what he did, he couldn't have won the fight. He was going to have to knock him out. And everybody was saying, but he lost by a point, so why are you complaining? the press's attitude back then was, well, if the score is way off, who cares as long as you got the right result. When I see people now nitpicking over a 1-point fight, literally, that turns out into a draw, and they say, oh, it should have, we should have won by a point. I think it's spectacular that people care. The fact is, those fights you just mentioned happened in different jurisdictions, in different states, with different judges, and despite what people think, I have no control over who they are. They're all, I think most judges are very competent people. I think that clearly there's always exceptions, but I think people forget that they are watching the fight on 3 different sides of the ring than you're watching it, because you're seeing the television's perspective. They don't hear the announcers. They're not talking to their neighbor. They are not. They are hearing the crowd's noises, and they are looking at something from a very different angle than you are. And when we get to a point where we're looking at a fight and we're arguing over whether a person should have gotten 1 point more than the other one, while I find it charming and amusing that everybody gets so upset about it, I'm sorry. We were back in the day when when Whitaker was fighting Jose Luis Ramirez and won every round and ended up losing the fight when he clearly blew out Julio Cesar Chavez and walked away with a draw. Fights were off by. We had a guy, Rocky Lockridge, went to Puerto Rico, fought Wilfredo Gomez. It was a 15-round fight. Rocky won the first 10 rounds. There's no way you could have even considered that he didn't win every one of them. He lost the last 5 rounds. They gave the decision to Gomez, the hometown fighter. I could go on for days with these. Rocky Lockridge fought a guy named Eusebio Pedroza from Panama. Fought him in New Jersey. WBA came up and officiated the fight, and there was a guy who scored the fight 14-1 for the other guy who happened to be from Panama. And, when the fight ended, Gil Clancy was the announcer on TV that night, and he said, that afternoon, he said, we have a new world champion. They were so sure Lockridge had won. And yet, as I said, one of the judges had it 14-1. The others were a little bit closer, but again, he was never in the fight. A 1-point fight is not a robbery. It's a difference of opinion. And I can't get concerned or worried about that. When you see something that is so egregious, and I've lived through them, I think the scrutiny is great because I don't see so many of those anymore. I don't see those decisions where one person, clearly should have won the fight by all measures. There's no dispute. That Lockridge fight I was just telling you about, I spoke to one of the judges when it was over. He'd gotten a call from his wife who berated him because he got it so wrong. Because he had Gomez winning when Lockridge had won 10 out of 15 rounds clearly, and I just I think it's wonderful that the fans care. It used to be you watched it on TV, you got disappointed by the outcome, you got mad, you yelled at the TV screen, and you walked away and forgot about it. It's nice that everybody can get together and vent and talk about it, and I think it puts all the judges on their toes, knowing that there's so much scrutiny. I think it's all great. But I can't worry as a promoter that if there's a few fights and people don't agree with the outcome on a 1-point fight. I keep saying, I thought Steve Cunningham beat Ademic that night, actually, and I was very surprised by the outcome. But the fact is, when you look at the scorecards, the difference between a win and a loss that night was 1 point on one judge's card. And that is not a robbery. That is just a difference of opinion. So,
Brandon?
Gotcha.
Yeah. I do have one quick question for you here, Kathy. I know a couple of weeks ago they had the mini documentary on Kovalev, the 2-day special that they aired, showing him behind the scenes before a fight. Is there going to be, that you know of as of right now, any 24/7 episodes to help build the fight here with Hopkins and kind of give fans a more of a outside of the ring side of Kovalev? Because that 2-day documentary, that mini doc, got a lot of positive reviews, and a lot of people liked it, including myself, and we would like to see more of that and get to know more about Sergey outside of the ring and how he's preparing for the biggest fight of his career.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Unfortunately, I believe HBO agrees with you as well. I know they're working on some stuff. We'll let them announce what it's going to be, but I promise you there's going to be a lot more information out there about Sergey and about Bernard Hopkins.
Right on.
Ryan?
All right. Last question. prior to recent years, when you got back on HBO with, Kovalev, Stevens, there was like a long period where, your fights just didn't make it to HBO.
I know.
What do you think was the biggest fight that they missed out on?
I think they missed out on a career, Tomas Adamek. Which might have looked a little differently if he'd been on HBO, because we would have been able to put him in some more big fights. He had a terrific fight with Chris Arreola, and we didn't seem to be able to bring him back. And at the time, I think the conventional wisdom was that a Eastern European was not going to be able to catch on in the United States, and happily Gennady Golovkin came along and blew that theory to smithereens. And then Sergey Kovalev and Provodnikov, so many guys came along and proved that was not true. But what I thought, what I was really running into over there was I could not convince them that Tomas Adamek was a good match for HBO, and so we had to do so many of those fights for him. We were televising them to Poland. We were filling up Prudential Center, putting 10,000 people in there, and fights were being shown in Poland, not here. I couldn't get him on TV. I couldn't buy him on TV.
Yeah, I think they were on pay-per-view most of the time.
Yeah, which really is, not the same. I think he would have had a much bigger career if we could have convinced them. I think, as I said, there are a lot of fights that he did in that circumstance where the opponents were dictated by budget more than anything else, and probably could have had some bigger fights for him. I mean, he did get on HBO with Arreola, he got on HBO with Klitschko, but I think there could have been some fun fights for him that I just couldn't afford to do under those circumstances that didn't get made. But so I don't know if I could point to a specific fight, but I think there would have been a whole very different flavor to his career, I think.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure. I admire you so much. And I look forward to having you on the show again, as we get closer to Curtis's fight. Maybe Curtis can join us. And, hopefully maybe Sergey might want to come on the show and speak with us sometime. But once again, thank you so much, and thank you for continuing to make these great fights for us and for the fans that are watching.
Thank you. It's good to be appreciated. You're welcome. And I follow you all on Twitter, so I'll keep up with you, too. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.